Hey everybody, Jehovah-Rapha is our word for the day. And I am so excited to be able to do Jehovah-Rapha. Rapha means healer. The Lord is our healer. And our scripture that this comes from is Exodus 15, 20 through 27. So the story takes place after Moses brought the people out of Egypt and they crossed the Red Sea. On the other side of the sea, before they crossed, water was their problem. They were trapped, and the army of Egypt was coming after them, and God did a miracle with the water. It's parted it, as many of you know, and they crossed on dry land, and then the Egyptian army was drowned in the water. They had a huge celebration for what God had done. Then they traveled just 3 days later, after a huge celebration. They travel 3 days later, and water is their problem again because they're in the wilderness. And you can't go very long without water. And so they get to a place called Marah, and there's water there, but there's a problem. The water is bitter. They can't drink it. I'm not sure exactly what all was in it, but it was bad water, and they couldn't drink it. And immediately the people started complaining, grumbling against Moses. So he went to the Lord, and the Lord showed him that there was a log, just a log of wood, and told him to take that and throw that in the water, and the water became sweet. The bitter water was made sweet. And then he made a covenant, the Lord did, with his people, a statute. And at the end of his statute, he said, if you keep all of my commandments, then I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians. He says, for I am the Lord, your healer. That's the first time God revealed himself to us that way. Jehovah-Rapha. I am the Lord, your healer. Something I noticed as I was studying this scripture here, that he actually healed the water for the people. The water was what was bad, and he healed the water, whatever was wrong with it. Then I noticed in 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. God is a healer. He not only heals us, but he heals our water. He heals our land. He heals our sickness. Years later, when Jesus is on the scene, and John the Baptist, the one who God specially anointed to make way for the Messiah, and John the Baptist is in prison, and he's wanting to make sure he has fulfilled his purpose and make sure that Jesus was the right person, was the Messiah. And so he sends some of his disciples to go ask Jesus if he was the one. For sure, are you the one? And what did Jesus tell them? He turned and he went and he started healing people. Then he came back to the disciples of John the Baptist and he said, go tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news preached to them. Out of all those things, only one of them is preaching. The rest of it's all healing of some sort. Jesus was very much about healing. He healed the water, land, sickness. He heals relationships. He even heals eternal death. The Lord heals. God intended to put the power of healing in the atonement. Was it because we asked for him to do that? No, it wasn't even our idea. It was God's idea. 700 years before Jesus showed up on the scene, God had Isaiah the prophet write that by his stripes you are healed. In Isaiah 53, I believe. And if you read that, it just goes down the list. And there's no question that God is the healer and wants us to be healed. In his Jesus ministry, there's 29 separate times when Jesus did a healing miracle. And some of those were like that some of those 29 were, he healed the entire village. He healed everyone that they brought to him. And that's just a small sampling. We've only got about 36, 45 days, somewhere in there, of the days that Jesus was on the earth doing his ministry, which was over 1,000 days. And we only have about 40 days of that. All those other days, he was doing ministry too, and he was healing them all. There's only a couple times when healing was not even easy to do. And Jesus went to Nazareth, and the scripture says that he was not able to do many miracles there because of their unbelief. It's not that Jesus went up and tried to heal somebody and they weren't healed, and he's like, oh man, come on, disciples, get around, let's gather, hold hands and pray harder, and it wasn't healed. That's not what happened. What happened was because of their unbelief and their jealousy, he was one of their people from that town, they didn't believe, so they just didn't even come and ask for the healing. There's only one other time that healing didn't happen in the New Testament, and that's when 9 of his disciples were praying for an epileptic boy, and they prayed, and the healing didn't happen. Jesus came down off the mountain, and the father of that boy came up and said, and asked, Lord, have mercy. My son has a sickness. Can you heal? And Jesus scolded his disciples pretty harshly there. And later they asked, and then of course Jesus healed the boy. So God did want the boy to be healed. And so the disciples later privately came and said, why couldn't we heal him? And he said it was because of your unbelief. Isn't that interesting? The same reason that in Nazareth that there wasn't a lot of miracles done, because of their unbelief. That's the only reason given in Scripture. Unbelief. Jesus healed them all. Acts 10:38. Jesus healed all who were afflicted by the devil. Afflicted by the devil. James 5:14. Is anyone sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church and let him pray for him. And the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick, and the Lord will raise him up. Psalms 103. Bless, O Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases. Jehovah-Rapha, the Lord is our healer. Many of you know that I have a story of personal healing. It was just about a year ago that I was praying, worshiping the Lord in church that morning. In my private time, my quiet time that morning, my time with the Lord, he was teaching me about love. And I set goals in that day in my quiet time. I've never set goals in my quiet time before or after. And very simple. I just said my goal for the day is to operate from, operate in, and operate through agape. And that day I came to church, and all I was doing was just worshiping him and loving every single person that I saw. And while I was worshiping, the Lord just whispered into my spirit, hey, Roger, you are no longer a slave to pain. You are no longer a slave of fear. And from that moment forward, I've not had another pain pill. I've not had any pain. The Lord is a healer. He still wants to heal. And I thought, what would have happened if I had believed him? If I didn't have faith, if I had unbelief, I'd still be hurting probably. The Lord does his part. He heals. Our part is to simply believe the truth, like a little child with pure faith. Just believe the truth. I don't know how many of you know Francis Chan. He's a man that I have a great deal of respect for. About a year ago, I saw him in a conference, or a conference. There was a panel of several bigger names up on the stage, and they were asking questions. And Francis Chan, on the spot, put himself out there. And there's one of these gentlemen had a back problem, and he said, "Hey, I just feel that we should pray for your back. Would that be okay?" And they gathered around him and prayed, and it appeared that nothing happened. But I I got to give Francis Chan credit for on the stage putting himself out there like that, just trying to have faith the best he could. Just recently, I heard a testimony of Francis Chan. He was at Moody Bible in Chicago on Founders Day. You can Google it. And he's giving a message to the people there. And he tells a story about how he went into a village where they had never heard the gospel before. And as he was going into the village, he had heard some stories about how mean these people were. They ran people out with knives and stones. So he's a little nervous. He's just praying. He starts to get nervous. He says, no, that's not what Jesus would do. He would go in with love, and he'd speak the truth, and he'd heal them. So he prayed that God would do that through him, and he got there, and he gave a message, and at the end, people came up for healing. And his testimony, Francis Chan's testimony, is that every single person he touched was healed. A little boy, a little girl, they were deaf. They both began to hear. God still heals. He wants to heal. He is Jehovah-Rapha. He'll do his part. We just got to do our part and believe. Believe like a child. Jehovah-Rapha.